something that is a hot topic that I can relate to so much is the idea of being competitive. Or not even an idea, I think just being competitive. And really, I think the question is this a good thing or bad thing? Am I for it or am I against it? Um, it's interesting because I think I would just outwardly say, like, I'm going to say it outright, I'm a competitive person. I think it was due to my upbringing. I don't think like my parents ever like put me up against people, but my dad specifically, he was quite intense when we were playing sport when we were younger, not in like a really bad or negative way, but just like, if we were there and we were showing up for something, we were there to compete and we were there to like do our best. And he was like literally the dad yelling when I was playing basketball, wasn't that good. He'll tell you that I was not that good, but he would literally be yelling like from halfway across the court, like, rebound, Neya, rebound. And he would just genuinely get frustrated when I wasn't like really like playing that well. And he would just like tell me. And, but he used to go also help me go down to the playground at the local school, at the basketball court, like put out cones, practice like drills and stuff. He was like very committed to trying to help us be the best we could be at a sport or anything we tried. And my dad's history is that he was a competitive swimmer when he was growing up. So I think he's always loved the idea of competition and sport. And so that's just like essentially just come down, it's just when you're brought up with it, it's just like something that's innate with inside of you. And so yeah, I love competition. Um, I think competition comes in many shapes and form, like obviously sport, academia, like singing, like creativity, anything. Like I mean, you can literally compete for anything nowadays. They have like slap challenges now where you can like stand there and get slapped in the face. Absolutely wild, looks so painful. I will not be there for that. But I also saw recently this crazy ass thing where people sit in a car and it's like I think it's car jiu-jitsu or judo. I think it's car judo. And you have to essentially like first get the person's seatbelt undone and then after that, like I guess get them out of the car. So crazy. Like they were like literally putting each other in a headlock in the seat. But it was amazing. But like, I mean, like, how do people even come up with these things? Where do they come from? But you know what? It's just like somebody has an interest and they make it a competition. I feel like that is one of my top things of why I love being competitive is just um by people being competitive, they come up with all these interesting ways to take a skill set or an interest, whatever it is, cooking, whatever, and making it, I guess, a place where you can, I guess, create like a livelihood for it. Maybe it's like it's a product of capitalism, but it is an area, I guess, like when you do a competition, you get good at something, there is the ability to make money from it and become like the specialist in that. But I think fundamentally it's that like humans, we do have interests in things and skills and hobbies, and it's really like being able to put yourself to the test of being the best at something. And let's dig into like that whole idea of the best of something and why like competition is, I guess, good. Let's go with the good first. So I think for me, I think when I view competition and being competitive, because that's specifically what we're talking about, I think being competitive is good because it makes you build like a good determination and resilience. I think being able to, like, say I want to get good at basketball, going into competition is a very harsh realization of like you against other people, how good you are at the skill or sport or like hobby that you're doing. And, being the best isn't for everyone, but I th- if you want to be the best at something, you have to have an essence of being competitive in you. And that's what gets you like to that place of having determination and resilience. And it's not for everyone. Like not every single hobby or skill that you pick up is going to be something that you can be at a competitive level at. But I do think it really helps to grow certain skill sets and values in yourself that you wouldn't maybe get if you were just like not having the opportunity for competition in other areas. So I think being competitive is definitely good for building resilience and determination. The other thing I think being competitive is good for is like when I say being competitive, I guess like the essence of like going out there and putting yourself out there to compete. I think one of the good things is you really learn how to lose, because you're not going to win every competition out there. You're going to start from, it's all about starting from zero and building yourself up to something. And I think if you can be competitive, you can really learn how to lose, because if you don't lose, then you're not really like having competition ever. So I actually think being like losing something is definitely a life skill. Like you have to like learning to be gracious when you lose is so hard, because it is so against the grain of like your I think like of a person feeling this great sense of achievement. And when you lose, it's just so easy to just go to such like I feel like it's so directly associated with negative connotations, like mentally. For me, I think learning to lose was kind of difficult. Like you had to really, and I think to this day, I sometimes struggle with it, because it depends who I'm, honestly, it depends who I'm losing to. Like if I'm losing to like a family member in a sporting match, oh, it's not, grinds my gears. But because I think I'm like closer to the person, and just like that might have a personal and natural gripe with that person, or just, I don't know, if you lose to your dad, you're just like, damn it, why? And so I think learning to lose and be gracious about it, especially like with family members, is hard, because you can be more of your raw self, and you can and you can be more unfiltered. But if I was playing against a friend, I wouldn't react or be so aggressive in like how competitive I was being, or how upset I was that I lost something, because I wouldn't want to like appear as a certain way to somebody. So I think that being competitive, and then in that process of being competitive, losing is so good for like character building, because it also teaches you um, how to take a loss, but also teaches you communication skills on like how to behave around different people if you lose, like what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, like what's worth it, what's not worth it. And so I think that's actually genuinely a life skill, and it's really not that easy. This third thing, I think, like in being competitive, I think like giving yourself the option to compete, but also like go in there and be a competitive person. It makes you have a lot of respect for other people, and respect for like how hard it is to get to a place. So, if I play tennis against somebody and someone's got an amazing stroke or really good, I have so much respect for that person, because I'm like, you have worked so hard to get to where you are, and I'm okay to take that loss. Or I'm like, it's like a honor to play with you and learn from somebody else. So I also think like um that's where being competitive is healthy, because you can go on to whatever you're doing, like maybe you're cooking and you love baking, being able to have a mutual respect for somebody else's work and art form or whatever they produce is really important in life, because I think it's humbling, but I also think it's a huge reality check of like learning this. There are so many different ways to like essentially skin a cat. Not that we want to skin a cat, but figure of speech. So I think putting yourself out there and like being a competitive person can teach you so much. I think also there's this whole notion of like, because I'm like quite competitive. Um, and I think sometimes people perceive that as like very intense, which I can understand. But I think that being competitive and is for me equals like caring about something. And so if I'm going to do something, I'm going to care, and I wouldn't do it if I didn't care. Like I wouldn't try and do it at my best if I wasn't there caring and like showing some sort of commitment to something. So that's what I think like being competitive really teaches you to be determined, resilient, and commit to something. Because I think something is so easy in life nowadays is to just be like, oh, it's just fun and games. Like, it's just a participation award. Like, we're just here to have some fun. Like, okay, cool, cute, until a point where it's like you're not even committing or trying at something. And then it becomes like your habit and your approach to things generally. And I just feel like you just generally become a bit meh, Like, if you take that approach to everything, well, then what's the like cool? There's like mindfulness and like I don't know other intrinsic things like that you can gain from doing things in life. But I do really feel like being competitive is not always a negative thing. It can be negative, but we'll talk about that in a moment. So I'm just saying, if you see somebody out there who is competitive and they're a bit intense about it, they have a bit of intensity, like even okay, honestly, even being competitive like at the gym, it's not being competitive with somebody else. Being competitive with yourself and like showing up there and grunting when you do that push or grunting when you pull up that weight, that's not a bad thing. That's I think for me that's like you're being competitive with yourself and you're pushing yourself to the limits and challenging yourself. And I think that's the essence of human growth. So I'm all here for it. And if you're out there grunting in the gym, you go, girl, you go, boy, you do that. And if you're out there listening to this, just, let people have their moment. Let people compete with themselves and push themselves because they're pushing themselves to the pinnacle of human creation. All right. And the last thing I think that being competitive is really good for is because you're like putting yourself in this environment where you're pushing yourself, you're challenging yourself, you want the best from yourself. When you do lose or you're faced with like, okay, I play a lot of sports. So I'm just gonna come down to like tennis, but like you're like six games won, so you're like losing, or okay, you're 5 games to 1. You're losing in the first set of a match. You really have to step back and like manage your emotions for one. That would be a huge one for me. Manage your emotions, understand like what the problem is and what you can change to solve the problem or at least help fix it. Hello, is that not just like the 101 in problem solving? So tell me that being competitive does not like help your problem solving skills. I think there's definitely a correlation between how competitive you are and how good you are at problem solving and like managing all those things that I said, which is like your emotions, like identifying problems and like figuring out solutions and being practical. I mean, consulting, take it into consulting. Am I right? Okay. So I think all in all, I think my positives of being competitive are quite clear. Let's move into my negatives. I think it's so obvious how, like, from even what I just discussed just then, like how being competitive can be negative on you as a human and your mindset. I think the number one thing around like being competitive is like becoming obsessed with winning. And not just that, but like what the idea of winning means to you and how you attach like your self-worth to that. Because I think undeniably, like if you're competitive, it's because generally you want to win. Okay, maybe not win, maybe you want to be the best at whatever it is that you're doing. You might not care about the medals or like trophies or being like all of the little, I guess, things you receive from winning the competition, but you fundamentally want to be the best. You want to be like out of 100 people, you want to be the one named as like, oh, he or she is or they are the best at whatever like that that is. Could be cooking a dessert, right? So I think you can't really mutually exclude winning from being competitive. So therefore, you have this relationship with winning, right? And achieving things. That is where I think being competitive really becomes complex because it becomes a very emotional thing where you can either get too emotional about winning or being too emotional about being competitive, or you can become emotionless about being competitive such that you just do whatever it takes and you don't care like who you hurt or what you do on the way up to that path. Boom. That is, I feel like, where you hit the nail on the head. So I think I've observed, I guess, like the idea of being competitive amongst two of my friends. And I think there's two different situations, and it's not covering, there's like so many situations that come out of that, but just two observations that I've made. So I have two friends who are both randomly like competitive swimmers. One like competed at a national level. I think the other one competed at like maybe like a very high like varsity level essentially. But they have very different views on competition, and I've observed it in both of them in different situations. Okay, so one of them is like is this character which is, oh, I'm not competitive. straight off the bat, when I first met her, she's like, "Yeah, I'm a competitive. I don't really care." And I was like, "Oh, okay." But I'm like, "But you used to be a competitive swimmer. Like, I'm pretty sure you do care. Slash, it has to be within you somewhere. If you competed at a high level in a sport, especially, there's just no way that you're not competitive." Anyway, I took her word for it. Then we went and played a casual game of spike ball, and it made me laugh so hard because she was so competitive. Like, not so competitive, but she had a competitive side to her, and she was wanting to win, and I was laughing because I was like, you don't have to oppress like you're wanting, or you're like yearning to win. It's so fine. Like, just own it. But I think, and she laughed about it. She's like, yeah, I am competitive. Hee hee. But I think for her, it's like, I think she waters down her competitiveness in an effort to seem more approachable and like less intimidating and friendly to other people. But I think that's like because of her general character. She's like super nice and the most lovely person, but she has accomplished a lot of amazing things in her life. And I think sometimes she waters down like her achievements in order to seem more like normal, and more appealing and approachable to the average person. Which I can totally understand because, like, I feel like maybe if you are really extraordinary at something, like my sister was so good at golf, it becomes like your personality, and like all everyone like associates with you is whatever you were good at. Like I remember my sister just getting like endless amounts of golf balls for Christmas, and she was at the point where she was just like, honestly, I have other interests, people. I am a human outside of golf, but people don't like realize that, um, or recognize that. And I was actually having a really interesting discussion the other day, with this group that I'm part of, and we're talking about like idea issues, so like inclusion, diversity, equity, and action. And we were talking about, someone was doing a presentation on stereotypes, and what we kind of discuss a lot is like your personal bias towards things and the conclusions that you make because of you as your like upbringing, and like, I mean, every opinion you have is kind of a personal bias. But we'll talk about stereotypes and about how, why we stereotype, and why, like, what that means, I guess, in terms of like our brain. And I think the whole idea of like us stereotyping people is, I think one of, no, sorry, I think one of the aspects of why we stereotype people is to be able to try and find some sort of comfort or connection with somebody a lot faster than um than having to go through like the painful parts of like getting to know somebody. And I think generally when you're in an environment you don't know anyone and you want to find comfort, you will try and look for common interests or similarities. And so I think in the reverse of that, my friend is trying to make herself, she's stereotyping others, trying to make herself feel more normal. Or she's stereotyping what people would think about her and then trying to make herself more normal, and approachable, and then therefore being like, I'm not competitive, when obviously she is like competitive. So that's interesting. And then there's a second friend who also is a competitive swimmer, but more like the varsity level. She doesn't like competition because it makes her not enjoy whatever she's going to do. So I guess what she was trying to communicate to me was that when she was young, because she kind of went into the sport just because she was good at it, and like her parents wanted her to do it, she didn't necessarily enjoy it. When she had to go to competitions, etc., it wasn't really something that she enjoyed to do, but she was taught to like do her best at that, and to be competitive she had to do her best, try her best, and be at a certain level and in a certain mindset to do those competitions. So I think for her, the reason why she doesn't want to compete is because of the mindset that she goes into when she attaches the word competition to something, which is very interesting. And I think, like, I mean, just hypothesizing, it could be maybe a form of anxiety or pressure, or just like, you know, when she is at the intense level of having to be competitive, she doesn't, not a person that she likes, or it gives her just just not fun for her anymore. And then, like, I think when you're, just because you're being competitive doesn't mean that something doesn't have to be fun. But I can understand for her perspective how, like, if she goes to that level because she's been mentally trained to go to that level, she doesn't really find it enjoyable anymore. And I think, like, if you think about it, you see that in a lot of people, at in sport, in like the music industry. Once you start to win lots of awards, you get the best at something, things start to like fall off of, and your like sense of enjoyment for something isn't maybe the same anymore because of what is attached to like that part of you when you are being competitive. And so I think it's very interesting to consider and think about. So I think when people say to you that they're not competitive or they don't like competition, think for a moment a little bit deeper into why they're saying that. Um, I also think, okay, so something that I feel like I could relate to quite a lot is like not being able to own your competitiveness and feeling embarrassed. So I think this is like a negative aspect to being competitive where you try to like oppress your competitiveness. And this is what I was saying, sorry, suppress your competitiveness. And that's what I was saying about my friend before. I feel like the same. I felt the same for a long time, but not because I was like, not, and it's not because I'm super good at something. It's honestly just because I just am competitive as a person. And what I was saying at the start of how I was brought up, it's just like in me. I enjoy competition. I like it. And when I do compete, my definition of being competitive is like I give it my all and I'm a little bit intense. Like I will grunt when I play tennis. I will like get annoyed if I hit a bad shot. But for me, it's a reflection of like being competitive equals you care equals I'm gonna try my best. But for a really long time, I really like tried to like play off how competitive I was, like play it down, sorry. Because I thought I was embarrassed. I mean, well, not thought, I was embarrassed to like be so competitive because I guess people around me were just like not as competitive. Um, Also paired with the fact that I feel like physically I'm a bit intense when I like play a sport because I just get really sweaty. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like I get really sweaty and I try so and it, like partnered with my try really hard. It just makes me look extra intense. And so for a long time, I feel I felt a bit insecure about that and being that competitive, especially if I'm just playing like a high school game of soccer. Um, but I think for me, I um yeah really struggled with just like being okay with being competitive for a long time. But I think once I accepted it and now I'm like so happy to just be like, yeah, I'm competitive. I don't care. Like it's very freeing. It makes me feel like, oh, I can just be myself. And like, I mean, I think it goes back to the notion of what I always say in my podcasts. It's just like, no one really cares that much, like you just do you. And I've gotten over the fact that people give me like weird ass looks when I'm being like super intense and just own it because it's at the end of the day, like whatever you're doing is for yourself and it's whether or not you enjoy it. I also think that another thing that I can relate to with being competitive is just I have this like a really annoying because I am competitive, I have this negative this annoying habit that I've developed of like needing to prove myself, which is really irritating because I am very confident in who I am, but I feel like whenever like something is brought up and it seems to be like a competition environment or like statement or something that I think I'm okay at, I have to like go and make it known that I'm actually okay at that and that I can do it, which is so annoying. And it just speaks to me just like not being like humble or modest. But I think it like this the idea maybe it's like I think it's definitely an insecurity of myself, like where I feel like people don't think when I was younger, I felt like people didn't think I was good enough or I could do something or achieve something. And so therefore I have this like weird knee-jerk reaction to try and prove to people how I am capable of doing something or so good at doing something. Um, which I do think I really pair back with my being competitive like the competitiveness I have in myself because I think in a way I'm kind of like I think in a way I am comparing myself and creating this competition with for myself against others, even if it's not like we're not actually doing the thing, but it's just like verbally saying like, oh, I'm good at tennis. Like I'm actually quite good at tennis as well. Like anyway, and I also just find like those people really annoying when they do that. So I mean, I'm pretty much saying that I find myself really annoying when I do that, and I'm honestly actively I have like a physical reaction to myself where I'm like, don't do it, don't say it, don't say it, and then sometimes I just say it, and you're like, why? Why did you say it? Why did you have to go and like be competitive and make and like let your competitiveness take over and say something really like unnecessary or not relevant? But you know what? We're always growing and learning. So I'm just going to like pat myself in the back and forgive myself. But I'm not going to lie. Sometimes I give myself the ick. Okay, and then I think the last thing that's can be a real downfall from being competitive is obviously just the whole idea of comparison, right? I think I mean, you see it in movies all the time, like the narrative of, oh, she was like a competitive XYZ, or she's just competitive generally because she's trying to prove herself. And then it becomes this like crippling energy where you don't like to lose, you don't want to lose, and then you just become obsessed with like winning, which kind of goes back to what I was saying originally for the my my arguments for against. So I think it's really all about like learning to manage co- like comparing yourself and being okay with comparing yourself in a competitive way in a healthy manner where you're like, I guess, isolating and segmenting what it is that you're competing in or what it is that you're like being competitive in, and not making it a reflection of you as a whole person, but just whatever that specific skill set is. I think being forced to have to like forcing yourself to have to always win is not the answer. I think it's more just like the idea of being competitive for me is just like showing up the best you can for yourself in that moment, whatever it is you're doing. And I think that's what it's more a reflection of, which should be more of what the focus is. So this leads me to my conclusions. I think overall, I'm on team be competitive. I think the positives definitely outweigh the negatives, but I would not be ignorant to the fact that, there are a lot of negative consequences of being competition and competitive, and the downfall and spiral into that can be really, really like really steep or very fast as well. And so what I would say is I think things that you can do to like maintain a healthy relationship with being competitive is, I think, try to decide early on like what type of competitive person you are and what environment you need to thrive in your competitiveness. So is it that you're a team competition person? Is it that you're an individual competition person? Like, I think it's good when you're younger to try out the different situations where you like in a group setting, you work in a individual setting, and you see and what, like, how do you feel? How do you work? How do you think? Because some people are just better in like an individual sport than they are in a team sport. Like, it used to drive me crazy when we played like basketball or high school, like netball or something like that. And you just get put in this team with people who like don't even care. And then they just give you zero effort and it just pisses you right off, honestly. So I think it's more of really dependent on that aspect. And then when I say what environment do you need to thrive in, like who are you surrounding yourself with? Like what is it if you're doing something that's like community based, like, I mean, like even if it's individual, like you go and find a community that is supportive, that is encouraging, that's teaching you good habits of like how to have healthy competition within yourself, but also healthy competition amongst other people, where it's not just like where it's not toxic and it's like all about winning, or they compare you or define you on how well you do at something. I think that is really important. It's like what you take outside of that competition is what breeds like your level of competitiveness and how healthy it is. I think also think about why you are competing and what you want to get out of it. And that's what I was saying before. And I think like you segment and like isolate the times when you are being like your competition from the rest of your life. If you can show up being competitive in a situation where it's something that you care about and it's something that you want to get something out of. But if it's something that you're not needing to have that personality, and you don't have to always switch it on, right? You don't have to always be competitive and have that feistiness or fire to you. I think the last thing is like just really think about like what you can learn and how competition develops you as an individual. I think if you're always reminding yourself of like, what can I learn from this situation, as opposed to like the different narrative of like, why were you so bad at that, right? Or why didn't you do this? Or you should have done that. I think if you always look future wise and future and development focus, then you can always think about like, oh, okay, I lost that match day. Where could I have done better? Like, okay, my forehand wasn't really doing that well. Did I lose concentration in this part? You know, that way you're looking at being competitive as a development opportunity versus like a space where you just want to find issues with yourself or flaws and get down on yourself. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. Go out there and be a little bit competitive in something if you're not. I think it's really healthy for your self development and like general mind set and just like work ethic. I just think it does wonders for you. But always, as I said, like keep things balanced and everything in moderation. Bye.